about what I've been trying in chemistry for the last term, which was trying out this flipped classroom approach. So the flipped classroom, the idea is that content delivery, that part of the course, is shifted from lecture time into the student's own time. So this frees us up to use sort of the contact time with lecturers in a sort of more constructive manner than just content delivery. There's various people who've been involved with it since it sort of started being developed in the 90s. So Eric Mazur in Harvard developed this thing called peer instruction. He's on Twitter, and Julie Schell, so one of the researchers in his group's also on Twitter, and they're quite interesting to follow. Another name which comes up a lot is Sams and Bergman, and they've really pioneered this approach in secondary education. And they've just published a book which I think the library's just bought 2 copies of. And this approach is now sort of slowly catching on in higher education, so I wanted to try it out for myself. So basically, materials set in advance for the students to study. So it could be guided reading, or it could be something like video podcasts. Then the idea is that to ensure the students have actually done this work, we set some form of assessment, and they can then try and put what's been covered into practice. And then we come up to the timetable slot, which is now no longer a lecture, but it can be used to address areas of difficulty or go into areas of which the students have mentioned are of particular interest. So the way I did it in the autumn term was I did this for 2 lecture courses which I teach. So a part 2 lecture course, compulsory course with just over 100 students, and a part 4 optional lecture course on molecular modelling, and that's just under 30 students. The first one, so the part 2 lecture, is quite content heavy, I would say, which I think made it good for this approach. The second one is a lot more sort of research focused, more descriptive, and perhaps didn't work quite as well. I'll come back to this. I basically generated video podcasts based on PowerPoint slides using Camtasia Studio. I've got a couple of licenses in the chemistry department. I did use Sony Vegas Movie Studio a little bit for getting extra video clips. And then I put the clips up on YouTube. So this is what the lectures look like. So we have the PowerPoint slides, and then sort of me in a little window just in my office talking. And then I used Blackboard to set a sort of pre-lecture test. After an introductory session, I made the first video clip available, and then the students had to complete the Blackboard test before the timetable session. And the last question in the test was this one here, so allowing them to sort of comment freely on either one thing they were confused about or one thing they found difficult, and so on. Based on their responses to this, I used sort of just-in-time teaching to prepare the materials. So unfortunately, my Part 4 lecture class was 9 o'clock Monday morning. So I basically said that to the students, as long as they've done it by 8 o'clock Monday morning, that gives me an hour to sort of throw some stuff together and to present and to discuss in the lecture. The Part 2 lecture was 5 till 6 on Thursday, so also not a great timetable slot. So once I put that together, then there was the timetable session. These are the sort of responses I got to the Blackboard assessment into the final section, comments on what you could and couldn't do. So comments like, couldn't do question 6, well, that was just one student, but if 10 students have said the same thing, then that shows there's a problem with that. This sort of comment I found was very useful, because if again 5 or 6 students sort of all said they didn't understand slide 29, that shows that there's a problem with slide 29, which I can then revise for next year. So I actually got a lot more detailed feedback than I would from sort of just giving a traditional lecture. Then some sort of comments like this, which you often get. Some said they'd like more written information. So I got the impression that some people were just watching the videos rather than watching the videos and taking notes. But some of the questions I got were sort of actually taking the material and thinking more about it. And so they actually posed quite interesting questions. Just-in-time teaching, well, it seemed to go okay. There was a bit of time problem for the Part 4 lectures, and actually some things worked better than others. So when I turned up for the timetable slot, occasionally I used sort of workshop-style questions, which I gave out to the class and they worked through them. That worked quite well. Things when there was a lot of interaction with the class, they also worked very well. This is sort of a plot showing sort of whether the students actually turned up and whether they actually did the Blackboard assessments. So in pink, we've got the Part 2 students. So it started off attendance with the solid line, so it started off okay, and then it sort of goes about 25% absenteeism from lecture 2 onwards. It is a class year group we've had problems with attendance with, and it's just how it was. A lot more of them actually did the Blackboard tests in the dotted line and came to the lectures until the final week. Part 4, they're actually a lot more motivated to start with, so they were attending all the lectures, doing all the Blackboard tests, but then they seemed to drift away towards the end, which is one of the things which I have to think carefully about if I continue this for next year. Some of the comments, so these are 5 of the positive comments I've had back, just from a long list. So there are lots of things which I was actually hoping to get, sort of the idea of pausing the videos, actually stopping the presentation so that you can go and look something up or have a think about it or replay it if you haven't quite caught it. And then to balance that, 5 negative comments. The 4th year students were in general a bit less positive than the 2nd year students. So again, there are a few which I sort of take issue with slightly. That's what they said. It's interesting, actually, the videos in the end did come out at about 20-25 minutes, and that was an hour of what I normally delivered in a lecture. So it's the same amount of content, but it's just a bit more condensed. So I'm basically very pleased with how it went. I had students sort of coming up to me in the corridor saying, oh, I'm really enjoying these lectures. So I'll definitely use it again next year, definitely for the 2nd years. One thing I've got to think more carefully about is the Blackboard tests, especially with the sort of more descriptive things, because I tended to set sort of fairly vague, if you like, questions for the 4th year students, hoping that they'll sort of think about it and write a sort of a paragraph or so. And they didn't really respond to that so well, and especially because there was no right answer to the question which I was asking. This they also found a bit frustrating. So that's one thing I've got to think about carefully. So finally, thanks to chemistry students I tried it out on, Chemical Education Group and the Digital Ready project for giving me a bit of money.